Welcome to the Weekday Edition of Between the Hash Marks with Sean McCabe. I'm James Koklak. We got a great show lined up for you featuring the injury bug that has ridden the league and is one specific team in danger of losing their season. Remember to follow us on Facebook and subscribe to us on the iTunes podcast app as well as YouTube, all at Between the Hash Marks. This week, I'd like to touch on an unusual topic, but it's definitely mind-boggling. Without any further ado, this is my opening rant.
Your number one source for sports.
You know who I can't stand? Kevin Durant.
He looks like Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton had a kid.
Now, who can argue with that?
I hate Boston.
I'm the biggest Miami Heat hater you'll ever meet.
I just don't understand where you're getting your bogus information from.
What the hell are you even talking about?
Well, I'm sorry you're too freaking sensitive to handle the truth.
You think I'm crazy? I'm just getting warmed up.
You're now Between the Hash Marks with James Koklak and Sean McCabe.
In a recent poll on TSN, the top 50 players in the NHL, Connor McDavid made the jump from number 3 in 2016 to number 1 in 2017, leaping Sidney Crosby. Yes, McDavid won the MVP last year, brought Edmonton back to the playoffs, and won a scoring title with 100 points, 30 goals, 70 assists, and a plus 27 rating. Now let me just dive into that really quick. Goals and points are different. He had 100 points because he had 30 goals and 70 assists, which is a helper. So combined, it is 100 points, and a plus 27 rating is kind of like basketball. He was on the ice for 27 more goals scored for his team than against his team, which is really, really good. And those accomplishments from someone who's just 20 years old are worthy of being the top player in the league. Don't get me wrong. He averages a little over a point a game for his young career so far, which is also very impressive. But Sidney Crosby is still the best player in the league. At Connor McDavid's age, 19 and 20 years old, Crosby had already brought the Penguins to back-to-back Stanley Cup finals in 2008 and 2009 as the captain, winning the 2009 Stanley Cup. Crosby has never played a full season due to concussion issues. In 2007-2008, he only played 53 games and only played a total of 99 games from 2010 to 2013, out of a possible 212, with the 2012-2013 being a lockout year and the NHL only playing 48 regular season games for all teams. Crosby has played in 784 games in his NHL career and has 1,030 points, 383 goals, 647 assists, and he's hit the 1,000-point mark before the age of 30 despite all the missed time. He's hit the 100-point plateau 5 times in his career, with the most being 120. Mind you, he's never played a full 82-game season. He also averages over a point a game in the playoffs, with 148 games played and 164 points total, with 27 points in 24 games last year in the playoff run that they had to his second Stanley Cup in a row. Crosby is now coming off back-to-back Stanley Cups, which gives him a total of 3, as well as winning the Conn Smythe Trophy the last 2 years as the playoff MVP. The Conn Smythe Trophy is the playoff MVP, Super Bowl MVP, best player in the playoffs. He also has a plethora of other awards, like a 2-time MVP in 2007 and 2014, and could have won it last year as he led the league in goals with 44 and had 45 assists for 89 points and a plus 17 on the year in 75 games, 7 less than McDavid. He also led the league in points in both 2007 and 2014, his MVP years. He is a 2-time scoring champ of the league, which is the Rocket Richard Trophy, and I mean scoring goals, not points. He's led the league in points too, but he's led the league in goals 2 times in his career. In 2010 with 51 goals and last year with 44. Crosby has continued his dominance for over a decade and has not slowed down as he's in the prime of his career still, just turning 30, and has led his team to 3 titles, including now defending back-to-back cups, which is nearly impossible in the NHL. Not to mention, Crosby has held the top spot on this list since at least 2010. For McDavid to take over that top spot, he needs to continue on the pace he is on and bring Edmonton to the promised land and bring back a Stanley Cup for all of Canada, a hockey-crazy nation who is cup-deprived for 24 years now since the Canadiens brought back a cup to Montreal in '93. McDavid is clearly the number 2 player in the league, but 2 things I need to see from McDavid is a Stanley Cup and continued success before I crown him the best player in the world. What are your thoughts?
James, we're not talking about career accomplishments here. We're talking about right now. And yes, Crosby has the better team. Crosby has had the better career, much better career. It's not even close how much better Crosby's career has been thus far. McDavid's only played 2 years, going into his 3rd year now. But we're in a vacuum. We're just going to be talking about right now. Last year, Connor McDavid won the MVP award over your beloved Sidney Crosby. Yes, he played in a couple more games, but that's because he can actually stay healthy and produce for his team. He had 30 goals, which was less than Crosby, yes, but he had 70 assists, the most in the NHL. Also, he was the points leader, like you said, more than your beloved Sidney Crosby, and he's on an inferior team. What else do I have to say?
Well, you know what? What I can say about that right now is if we put McDavid and Crosby on the same ice, I personally think Crosby would win. But I don't, not that Crosby's beloved to me. He's actually on my arch rival of a team. Anybody who knows me, I am a huge New Jersey Devils fan, and I can't stand the Penguins. And Crosby has dominated my team for years. And yes, McDavid won the MVP last year. But Crosby only had 12 less points, or 11 less points, than McDavid, and 7 less game played and then in the playoffs, where it really mattered. What did Crosby do? He went out and won the MVP of the playoffs and won a Stanley Cup last year, as we're talking presently. So that being said, Crosby may have the better team, but Crosby does not play with the better players. Crosby plays on a line with Connor Sheary, who was benched in last year's playoffs. Also plays on a line with Jake Gensel, who went off in last year's playoffs, but he was a rookie, and we all know he went off because he played with Sidney Crosby, where the Oilers have a solid young team. They have the likes of Leon Draisaitl, who put up phenomenal numbers last year. They have Milan Lucic, who is a big veteran presence. They have a lot of young talent. Adam Larson, Darnell Nurse, the list goes on. They are so young and talented. They have been predicted to win the Stanley Cup this year over the Penguins. So I don't even know if we can consider them a better team overall anymore at this point. They may be neck and neck.
But last year, Pittsburgh was far and ahead, the better team. And yes, Crosby does not play with the other best players on the Penguins, but don't the Malkin and Kessel lines put goals in the net as well while Crosby's on the bench? Doesn't that help the Penguins get those team achievement awards?
You have to have a team around you, yes, but Crosby brings this presence that you know when he is on the ice, there's just nothing that you can do to slow him down. He is eventually going to have his way at some point during the game. Don't get me wrong, McDavid is right there. They are neck and neck. But the one argument that I have to say, as right now, if you're picking the Penguins and the Oilers to go to the Stanley Cup Final this year, who is coming out on top? The team that has no experience or the team that has all the experience? And I'm going with the Penguins.
Obviously.
And that's why I put Crosby ahead of him at this time, because they may be neck and neck with skill. But Crosby has that level of experience.
No, what I'm telling
doesn't.
you is McDavid has more skill right now. He's more talented right now. He is the quicker player without the puck right now. He is the quicker player with the puck right now.
You can be a quicker player with and without the puck, but it doesn't mean you're the better player. There are two sides to a hockey game.
And also,
at a position they play, which is center.
Also, one thing I want to bring up: Crosby is playing for a team, the Pittsburgh Penguins, that only went on a 4-year playoff drought before they got him, and the 10, 15 years before that, they were making the playoffs every year. Connor McDavid, when he joined the Oilers, they hadn't made the playoffs in 11 years.
Yes.
That is a harder thing to do. They went out of that culture.
They went to the Stanley Cup in 06 and then hadn't made it since.
Getting out of that culture is a lot tougher to do, and Crosby's never really had to deal with that.
Well, I can counter that and say that Crosby kept Pittsburgh Penguins in Pittsburgh, that they were nearly bought out of Pittsburgh and moved to another city. So it's just, Crosby is now considered the savior of Pittsburgh and the Penguins nation. And the last thing I want to say is that as much as I despise Crosby, I think he's a little baby girl on the ice. I think he complains a lot, but he's the best player in the world in my opinion. And the last thing I do want to add to this is people thought Mario Lemieux was the best Penguin ever, and that Mario Lemieux is now probably the third best player when people thought he was the second, but I think Jágr took that over in recent years. Crosby has surpassed what Mario Lemieux did for the Penguins in all that success in the 15 years that you were talking about before they had him. So that being said, I just think that right now, if you put them together, I think they're even. McDavid is on his way, though, I'll tell you that. At being only 22 years old, Crosby 30, give it another 2-3 years, Crosby really loses a step. McDavid's going to be, he is the next Crosby. I'll leave it at that.
All right. Tell us what you guys think. Is it McDavid? Is it Crosby? You let us know. Please comment on Facebook. Coming up next, we're tackling some of the biggest injuries in the NFL on BTH.
You're listening to Between the Hash Marks with James Koklak and Sean McCabe, brought to you by an unknown sponsor we don't have yet. Now back to the show.
And we're back here on BTH. We just got done talking about Connor McDavid and Sidney Crosby. Now we have the NFL's biggest injuries, and do they really matter? We're going to give you what we think about fantasy-wise and how they actually affect the real NFL team. First up, we have Dalvin Cook for the Minnesota Vikings, out for the year. The injury for Dalvin Cook on paper looks absolutely awful. Yes, they are losing their workhorse, a star in the making, but running backs are a dime a dozen, very easy to replace. If you watch the Monday night game, they ran the ball all over the Bears with Jerick McKinnon and Latavius Murray, even though they didn't use Latavius Murray that much. But as you can see, they did not miss a step without Dalvin Cook.
I was very surprised, to be honest, because I knew Jerick McKinnon would step up in a pretty big notion, but he's not a very good actual running back, I should say. He's more of a receiving back, or Shane Vereen type of back, where Dalvin Cook can do it all. He broke how many records did Dalvin Cook break at Florida State? It's just
all of them.
He's an unbelievable talented back, and I think you hit it right on the head. Right on paper, it's huge. Moving along in the season, if Sam Bradford could have stayed healthy, maybe this Vikings team could have snuck into the playoffs, because I think they're inexperienced, but Dalvin Cook made them so dynamic that you literally had to, you couldn't just focus on one side of the ball. You had to focus on both the pass and the run. So I think it really does damper their offense moving forwards.
Now, obviously, fantasy-wise, this is, if he is your first or second best running back, it is really going to deter your season going forward. But if, in case you weren't paying attention, you need to pick up Jerick McKinnon. He is going to be the guy there now. If Dalvin Cook was your third running back going into this year, which for some people it was, some people drafted very well. I know people that they were able to get LaShawn McCoy, and they got Leonard Fournette, and then they got Dalvin Cook as their third back, and that it's just the luck of the draw.
Those people who had Leonard Fournette were happy this weekend.
Absolutely. But yeah, if you were relying on Dalvin Cook to be your number one guy, your number one workhorse, and now he's out, you need to pick up Jerick McKinnon. You need to hit the waiver wire hard for those running backs. Moving forward, we are talking about the two quarterbacks that got hurt a couple weeks ago, Derek Carr and Marcus Mariota. James, what are your opinions on them? Is it a huge injury? Huge injury, sorry.
Well, I don't think they're that big. I think that Marcus Mariota is going to be back. I think that they put a 2 to 6 week span on it because just in case, you know what I mean? But and if he comes back in 3 weeks, it's like, oh, well, we said he could be back in 6. So he came back in 3, he came back quicker. When we all know that he's got a pulled hamstring or a pulled quad, he's going to be fine. Derek Carr, on the other hand, scares me a little bit. It's a back injury. Back injuries are no joke. Apparently he's getting better, and he may even play this week. So it's not as significant as the other injuries we're going to talk about. But still, if I'm a Raiders fan right now, I'm worried because look at Tony Romo. A back injury can flare up next year, and the year after that, and the year after that, and the year after that. It could never heal fully. So that's where I'm worried about with Derek Carr. Yeah. Not so much the short, but the long term.
Do you think that they might be able to rush? They're going to try and rush Carr back because they're 2-3 now.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And they're playing the Chargers. Chargers coming off a big win in New York, 1-4.
I cannot believe I just have to stop you right there, just because I heard a comment this weekend by an announcer and I couldn't believe it. And they're like, well, the Chargers are here playing in New York, but they should be well prepared because they have 16 road games this season. I'm like, did he just say that?
They do have 16 road games.
I know they do, but how can you say that over the air? Like, poke fun at how bad
Well, when you have
LA is
when you have a
for them right now?
35,000 seat stadium, only 20,000 people show up and 15,000 are from the other team. Yeah, you're playing 16 road games. But with Derek Carr, if they don't rush him back, I think they will be fine going forward. This year, maybe lost. EJ Manuel is not the real deal. I know he kind of looked good at the end of the Denver game, but we saw against the Ravens. We all knew going into the Ravens game that he was going to be trash. But please, Oakland, don't ruin Derek Carr's career by bringing him back too quickly. If you look at what the Vikings did with Sam Bradford last night, they brought him back a week, maybe 2 weeks too early, and he looked awful, and they almost lost the game because of it.
Not only that, but you just invested, $125 million
Exactly.
into the man, and he's got a back injury now. You better be careful with your prized possession.
Yeah, put him on the IR. Let him come back at the end of the year when he's fully healthy. With Marcus Mariota, 2 amazing matchups coming up this upcoming week. I know he's got the Colts at home. That's going to be an amazing matchup for him. I think Marcus Mariota is going to be fine. Hamstrings are very tricky to deal with, but he's a quarterback, and as long as he doesn't run the ball too damn much, I think he will be fine. As far as fantasy-wise, Derek Carr, go pick yourself up another quarterback right now. Marcus Mariota, you should be fine.
I agree for both of those.
Moving forward, J.J. Watt. Now, this is an astronomical loss for the Houston Texans. This is the biggest injury we have on our list of injuries here. He is the heart of that defense, the heart of the defensive line. He controls everything. Every team prepares just for him, and that's why everybody else on that defense plays well. And not only that, he is the most influential person in that city. You saw what he did for Hurricane Harvey. He raised over $33 million. A huge loss emotionally and for the team and for your fantasy defense. If you have the Texans defense, you saw when he went out what the Kansas City Chiefs were able to do. They lit them up. They didn't have any pressure on the quarterback. This is the biggest loss that we have to talk about today. James, what do you think?
I can just sit here and shake my head because apparently the Texans defense can play without a heart. With what you just described to me. Because what happened last year? J.J. Watt done for the season in what, week 1, week 2, before the season? I don't know. But I know he did not play the entire season. And the Texans defense was number 1 in the league. They are going to be just fine.
Well, number 1 in what aspect?
In total defense. In total defense, they were number 1 in the league in total defense last year.
Because in total yards, I thought it was New England.
But you know what? In all reality, last year, I just want to touch on another point you made really quick. Is that yes, he is huge in the community, raised all this money. He's a fan favorite. People go to the games to see him play. Defenses, yes, they game plan for him. But last year, they were the number 1 total defense. Not total for a point that I'm going to bring up later, is that you can have the best. You can have the best passing offense in the league, worst rushing offense in the league, and you might not be 15th in the league in offense. You might be 24th, depending on what everybody else averages out to. So the Patriots may have had the best yards per game, but I'm almost positive the Texans had the number 1 defense in the league last year.
Well, with one thing, J.J. Watt, do you realize how big of a player that you have to be the number 1 guy, the most talked about person when you are not the quarterback? How good you have to be when you're not the quarterback, but you are the captain, you are the guy everybody looks to, you're the guy the whole city looks to when anything is in trouble. Do you realize what that takes? J.J. Watt is a larger-than-life person and a larger-than-life player. They are absolutely going to miss him. And just want to touch on this. I mean, yeah, they made the playoffs in the worst division in football. Who cares? But when they actually and then they played the Raiders without a real quarterback, and then when they played a team with a real quarterback, they got slaughtered.
I don't think J.J. Watt is going to make the difference in that playoff game. And they played a Patriots team who went on to win the Super Bowl. So I just think that, yes, this injury is big. It is big. But is it bigger than everything else? I don't know. I just think that they showed they can play without him for an entire season, not just a couple games.
All right. We obviously disagree on this one. Moving forward, Odell Beckham Jr. out for the year. What are your takes on this?
This would have been the biggest. This would have been ginormous if it wasn't for Brandon Marshall getting hurt and everybody else on the Giants' wide receiving core getting hurt. So
why doesn't it make it a bigger injury with those other players getting hurt?
Because it's, a couple reasons. First of all, their season's done. 0-5.
You heard it here.
Everybody on their wide receiving core is now hurt. So having Odell out there is not going to fix their season. And in a sense, it could be like a blessing in disguise for them, because this injury could have happened in December, and then Odell could be out for the first 2 months of next year instead of being fully healthy for training camp next year, and finishing off this season, which is now technically worthless to the New York Giants. There is a 0% chance they are going to make the playoffs this year, and I don't care if the number is not 0 yet. Right here on BTH, you heard it, as Sean just said, a 0% chance the New York Giants make the playoffs.
Well, I mean, if you just listened to me in the preseason, I would have told you. I told you this right from the get-go. The Giants weren't making the playoffs. A lot of you decided not to listen. I don't know why. Obviously,
Fantasy, this hurts though.
Because, absolutely.
Because with missing Brandon Marshall and missing all these other wide receivers on their roster, Odell could have went from like 10 targets a game to 23 targets a game. Could have been putting up monster numbers all year.
Yeah, no, with Odell, if you had a really good team, I think you'll be able to withstand this storm of Odell getting hurt. But if you had a bad team before this week, if you were sitting at like 0-4 or 1-3, you really should have thought about trading Odell, because that would have been the perfect time to like get some nice value for him. Mm-hmm. And if you are sitting here at 1-4 this afternoon, this morning, whenever time you're listening to this, you should take your best player and trade him for 2 or 3 really good players, and you can end up winning on this trade here.
I feel bad for anybody who has Odell that's in first place right now that's looking at the playoffs, because if you have a championship team and you just lost Odell, you're probably looking at a first-round exit at this point, unless you can find that stud replacement on the waiver wire like David Johnson was 2 years back.
I just want to bring up my points about the team. I agree with you that it is a blessing in disguise, because now they can move forward. They can, with their rookies and younger players, and they could start to build towards next year and have some guys who actually played in meaningful games, or relatively meaningful games, however meaningful you want them to be for the Giants. But this will allow them to get better for next year. But coming up next, I was at home rewatching a certain NFL game yesterday, and I noticed something that you are definitely going to want to stay tuned for on BTH.
You're listening to Between the Hash Marks with James Koklak and Sean McCabe, brought to you by an unknown sponsor we don't have yet. Now back to the show.
And welcome back to BTH. We just gave you the update on the biggest injuries in the NFL season. Now I'm going to tell you why a certain team is in a lot of trouble forward. You know how you can just is coming to an end. There's hundreds and hundreds of signs, but it's ignored by most people for whatever reason. But when you look at all these isolated incidents and put them together, it really makes a lot of sense. And Big Ben does not seem that interested in football anymore. He looked shot against the Jacksonville Jaguars. I was reaching the game yesterday. I'm a Jags fan, so I'm rewatching the game. I can finally do so peacefully because I know the result of the game. I know my Jags whooped them. And I'm just watching. And Big Ben does not look like he cares. He doesn't look interested in the game. And in post-game interviews, Jacksonville Jaguars players agree, and they knew that they had him all the way. Now, last year, Mike Tomlin was not able to handle the locker room at all. Too many antics, too many personalities, too many divas, the Facebook Live interviews, blatant disrespect of the coaches by the players, and there's continuous struggles against New England. And then after they lost that AFC Championship game, there's a subtle call out by Big Ben towards Mike Tomlin saying that the locker room and that the players are undisciplined. Now, to me, this was a shot at Mike Tomlin and saying, okay, management, you need to go find us another coach right now because Mike Tomlin is not doing the trick. And then over the offseason, he had interviews and he had comments about how much he loves spending time with his kids and his family. But you know what? He comes back. He's not going to retire because he has a super talented team. Maybe the number one offense into the preseason, at least top 5.
It's the team that I picked going to the Super Bowl this year, taking down the reigning defending champions.
Yeah, and everybody, if you didn't have them one for your preseason offense, you definitely had them in the top 5. You have weapons everywhere. Le'Veon Bell, Antonio Brown, just everywhere. You loaded up the defense as well. You got some nice draft picks with the defense. You got some nice free agencies with the defense. You have a legitimate shot. But as the season comes around, the same problems are happening. The Le'Veon contract dispute, the holdout, more Antonio Brown antics, the national anthem distractions, saying Roethlisberger said himself that he had trouble sleeping at night before the national anthem. The offense isn't popping off like it's supposed to, and we're saying, okay, now it's going to be the next week. It's going to be the next week. How much time is it going to be till this offense finally pops off? And the nail in the coffin for me was Ben Roethlisberger at the end of the Jaguars game saying, maybe I just don't have it anymore.
So retire.
Yeah.
Retire.
So to me, that is the classic, it's not you, it's me, I want to break up with you. So, and when you've already been thinking about retirement, when you've been thinking about it a little bit, you're already retired.
Oh, absolutely. In professional sports, you're either all in and you're not there. You're in it to win it, and that's why people pay so much money to go watch you play. That's why you make so much money. That kind of pissed me off when Ben Roethlisberger said that. And just some quick stats that point out to me, how is this possible for the Steelers offense to be this bad? 19.8 points per game, 21st in the NFL, 331 yards per game. That's 17th in the NFL, still in the bottom half of the team. 241 passing yards per game, that's 12th, still not in the top 10, and 90 rushing yards per game, that's 24th. This is a Steelers offense, like you said, should have been number one offense in the league. Now, I just want to dive into it really quick because I do agree that Le'Veon's holdout really is dampering his play right now, but I think the Steelers did that to themselves. If he's not as valuable as they think and running backs are truly replaceable, they should have let him walk and let him sign somewhere where he earned that contract because he does more than most running backs do. He pass blocks. He does all kinds of things.
Well, you can't just let him go.
But then you got to pay him. But you can't restrict him and then expect him to show up for camp where he can risk an injury and get hurt like Odell just did in a regular season game. And then what happens if he's not the same player and he doesn't get that money anymore? I think he earned that money. And I think Le'Veon is starting to look himself again. He is the one player on that team that is starting to look himself. AB is frustrating, I think, not with the Steelers itself, but I think with Big Ben.
Yeah.
I think the problem here with the Steelers offense and the Steelers as a whole, because their defense, really quickly, 17.8 points per game, that's 6th in the NFL. 276 passing yards per game, that's 4th in the NFL. 139.6 passing yards per game, that's 1st in the league. And 136.6 rush yards, that's 28th in the league. So if they can shore up their rush defense, they should be fine. Their defense is top 5 in everything except for points per game, which they're 6th in. They look fine on defense. Le'Veon is finally starting to come into himself. The problem here is Big Ben. I think that he's coming into the season. He made comments last offseason that maybe it is time for him to retire, and he was considering it. And I think that him coming in with that and not all being here is frustrating his teammates, and his teammates see it. And I think that I'm not saying Big Ben's a bad quarterback.
No,
Big Ben is
not.
Still an elite quarterback here, but I just don't think he's there mentally.
He's definitely not all there, and it's the thing that I think is frustrating him. It doesn't have the same discipline as the Bill Cowher teams, and Mike Tomlin hasn't really instilled that. And Mike Tomlin, in all honesty, hasn't really done anything as a head coach. Yes, he did win a Super Bowl, but it was with Bill Cowher's players.
And he went to another Super Bowl, but he lost.
He lost it. You don't get credit for going. No. You never get credit for just going.
Nope.
But anyway, the Steelers, they bolstered up their defense. They look a lot better on the defensive side of the ball. They're what, 7th, 6th right now in total yards? What was it that you had?
It's 6th in total. No, it's 6th in points per game, 4th in total yards, 1st against the pass.
Exactly. So their defense is obviously not the problem. And the defense isn't what let them down against Jacksonville. They had 2 pick sixes.
It was Big Ben.
Yeah, it was Big Ben because he tried forcing the ball in certain areas that he couldn't throw it to, and he just was not invested in the play. He's been thinking about all these other things, and it's a real troubling thing for the Steelers. I think they will be fine because they play in an easy division. I don't think their division is good at all.
I still believe they will make the AFC Championship game. I think they're too talented.
They're too talented. And if they don't make the playoffs, I think it's time for Mike Tomlin to get the hell out.
Him and Big Ben. I have a crazy stat here, though. Tell me, the Steelers have 17 sacks on the year. It's not great. It's not terrible. But the turnover differential is a -1 on the season.
Yeah, and I mean, 5 of them were from Jacksonville.
So, just the fact that when you have an elite quarterback, an elite wide receiver, and an elite running back, you're automatically, in reality, if we're looking at in reality, you may have the best wide receiver in the game and the best running back in the game on the same team. That doesn't happen very often. The ball should not be getting turned over the way it is. And I can tell you that Le'Veon's not fumbling the ball. I have him on my fantasy team. Okay? Antonio Brown is not fumbling the ball either.
Well, the thing is that
Big Ben is turning the ball over.
Antonio Brown played well, yes, but he was also shut down because he was throwing the ball so many damn times. That's why he had the 10 catches for however many yards he had. He had a nice fantasy day, but the ball was not gotten to him perfectly, even 50% of the time. And I don't know whether that's on Jacksonville just had an amazing day on defense. Jacksonville has an amazing defense. Big Ben was off. Big Ben is out of it. Or Antonio Brown really wasn't helping him out. Or just a combination of all those things. But if you're the Pittsburgh Steelers, you really need to take a look in the mirror because you weren't in it to please Ben Roethlisberger going into this season. You weren't willing to get rid of Mike Tomlin. I understand that you are one of the organizations that never fires your coaches. You've only had 3 coaches in your entire history in the NFL. I understand that. But you need to understand when the same problems keep coming up and up, where is this coming from? It's not
Sometimes
just the players.
Sometimes you need a new voice in the locker room.
You never see this with New England.
And it's you know what? And New England is the one exception because it's coming out right now in another sport with another great manager in the New York Yankees who I won't dive into right now because I have a ton to say about that. Coming back 0-2 with Joe Girardi blundering that call. This series should be over. The Yankees should already be moving on to playing Houston.
I thought you said you weren't bringing it up.
But that being said, because you know I'm right. But that being said, Joe Girardi should be back next year. And there's a chance that he won't be, and there's a chance the decision will be his. Because just sometimes after 10 years, you just need a new voice in the locker room. You need new players to get your message across to. That sometimes the message just gets stale. Not that Joe Girardi's message is a bad message, but it may just be stale to Yankee players, and he may be better off somewhere in like the Marlins with Derek Jeter. Same thing could be with Mike Tomlin. That maybe it's not that he's a terrible coach, because he did bring a team to the Super Bowl. He may not have won, but he did bring them there. And maybe they just need to. They need a
culture
scenery.
change. They need a culture change. That's really what it is.
Both sides need new scenery.
because they can't figure it out on any issue that they have, whether it's on the field or off the field.
But as far as this season goes, to fix your problems on offense, start pounding the ball with Le'Veon.
Exactly.
You give him the ball 30 times a game, whether it's 25 rushes and 5 passes, 23 rushes and 7 passes. You give the ball to him 30 times a game. You give the ball to AB 10 times a game if you can. You get everybody involved, but it all starts with running the ball. If you cannot run the ball, then you're not going to do anything. And I think they were worried about Le'Veon getting hurt in the beginning of the season.
Well, I mean, they have another reliable running back in James Conner. They could just use him as well. But that is it we have for today's show. Thank you for listening to Between the Hash Marks. Coming up next, we're going to be giving you picks against the spread, the DraftKings. James, you did it. Freaking amazing. We will talk about that next. Also, we want to talk about a huge trade that happened and the implications that it has for fantasy. James, do you want to add anything?
Except for the fact that I hate the trade more than ever. No. And the fact that I cannot wait to tell everybody what happened last night in my own fantasy experience. That'll do it here on BTH.